Reconnaissance. A mystical occurrence in the woods. End of summer, 1943, Bryansk forests. Our reconnaissance group was sent into the middle of nowhere to the bogs to find out if it was possible to flank the fascists with artillery. There was a dry passage in the bogs, 100 meters wide. And if we could drag the guns through this corridor, we could hit the Nazis from the flank. Tanks wouldn't get through there. Firstly, the thick thicket, and secondly, the tank, it's heavy. Just like that it can land in a swamp. Try to pull it out later. But light guns, if pulled by horses, would be just right. But the fascists also knew about this corridor and understood its importance. So they covered it very well. They built a bunker, dug trenches and stretched barbed wire in front of the trenches, everything as it should be. We could not get away with it. And here we lay on our belly, 5 of us in bushes, all camouflaged, covered with twigs, like wood spirits. We could not be distinguished from the surrounding scenery from 2 steps. And in front of us, at a stone's throw, there are German trenches. The trenches are not deep, because the water is nearby. On the right and on the left there is a swamp. There is no way around and it would be hard to break through. There are 40 men there and behind the bunker there is a dugout, the commander whispers, studying the situation through the optics. Yeah, there are 3 machine guns and even a mortar, it would be very hard to take them out, I complete the information. I see a hut about 100 meters to my right, reports our sniper Tulev, who lay down beside me. We peer into the thicket and indeed notice a shabby wooden log cabin between century-old trunks. The structure is barely visible against the background of the forest, and only Tulev's keen eye could discern the moss-covered hut at such a distance. What kind of a shack is this? Semyonov, go to the shack and check if there's a sniper, or he'll shoot us all. And, I beg you, do everything quietly, the commander ordered without taking your eyes off the optics. I cautiously crawled back and, covering myself with bushes and trees, slowly approached the hut. At times it was out of sight behind the tree trunks, but I kept to the direction. I crawled 100 meters, but the cabin was not close. I moved further. Another 100 meters, no result. What is this nonsense? I whisper in indignation. It's not a mirage, everyone has seen it. There she is, 100 meters away from me. I run for another 200 meters, but the hut looks like it's mocking me. As it was 100 meters away from me, it was not even a meter closer. I sat down under a tree, staring at the hut and trying to pull my thoughts together. First I pinched myself to see if I was dreaming, and then I began to talk quietly through the situation out loud. So, what do we have? There is a hut 100 meters from me. There is an order to inspect it for the presence of hostile forces. The order must be obeyed. Petrovich won't understand if I report to him that the hut has escaped from me. Ugh. It doesn't make sense. I went away from the group almost half a kilometer, and the hut has not caught up. Isn't that crazy? Suddenly I heard a woman's voice from the swamp, help. Help. I jumped in surprise. Where in the middle of nowhere are people, and even women? As I pushed my way through the thicket, I saw a picture, a young girl had fallen into the mire. She stumbled, it seems. She was sucked up to her chest, but she grasped the root of a mighty oak with both hands and held on with the last of her strength. I, naturally, rushed to the rescue. Grabbing her by the arm, I pull her to the shore, as much as I can. And then something happened that made me go gray before my time. The girl grabs my hand with a steel grip, the other hand continues to hold on to the root. Then she pulls me toward her with unbelievable force. Her eyes turn a dark burgundy color. And in a growling voice she says, "Listen to me, you warrior. I'm in trouble. I've been like this for 2 weeks now. As it happens, we had a disagreement with the owner of these swamps. He and I got into a big fight. Anyway, he grabbed me and dragged me into the swamp. Nothing good can come to me there. So I don't know how, but you've got to pull me out of his clutches, or I'll take you with me. You got it?" While she was telling me all this, her appearance changed, taking on a completely horrible features. In a matter of seconds she went from a beautiful girl to a nightmarish thing. Her skin had become like the bark of an old grape bush, hanging down in rags, but her hands and facial expressions had lost none of their suppleness. Her nose had 2 holes instead of a nose, and her mouth was like a talking hollow. 2 blood-red eyes stared at me from the wooden head. Anything had happened to me in the war, but here I must confess, I was a little frightened. I tried to get away, but it was no use. Her half-wooden hand vine literally wrapped its long fingers around my wrist. I drew my knife and stabbed at it a couple of times. But in vain, not even a trace was left. And the thing started laughing, like it was mocking me. "Who are you?" I blurted out. "I am the mistress of this forest, you call me by different names. Yaga, fairy, Kikimora, forest spirit, it's all me." Of course, as a child I've read fairy tales about Baba Yaga, but to meet me like this. If someone had told me, I would have laughed at him. But here I saw it with my own eyes. Maybe I'm dreaming after all. No, my arm is aching from pain, so tightly this horrible creature holds me. I noticed the tentacles coming up from time to time, as thick as my leg. The hag caught my gaze and explained, "It's holding me tight, I can't get out of it myself." After a couple of minutes, after assessing the situation, I made a decision. Taking out an anti-personnel grenade, I decided to bluff a little and said, "Now you listen to me. You have two options. Option number 1, I'm going to pull the pin out of the grenade with my teeth and throw it under the root you've grasped. The explosion will sever the root, I will die, and you will be at the disposal of your swamp friend. And believe me, I have nothing to lose. Failure to obey an order is a firing squad anyway. So an hour sooner or an hour later, it's all the same. Option number 2, I throw a grenade behind your back, right into the pool. The blast will put you in hell underwater for a few seconds. The tentacles come loose, and I pull you out. But here we work on a win-win basis. I free you, and you help me take out the Germans in the trenches around here. Which option do you prefer?" "The second," roared the hag in an afterlife bass. "And let's not cheat, I need that by morning there were no Germans alive. Though no, leave one, we are ordered to bring the tongue," I continued to bend. "I'll do it," came a resounding noise from a hollow in my head. "Well, Godspeed." I prayed, and pulled the pin. "Don't mention it," the hag hissed. "It's all right," I encouraged her, throwing the grenade into the swamp. I lay on the ground as soon as the grenade popped, and a split-second countdown began in my head. 4 seconds later, the slurry surged and boiled over. The pop was soft, the water muffled the sound of the explosion. I jumped up and tugged on the hag's arm with all my might. With her other hand she, too, apparently pulled the root toward her. With our joint efforts we pulled her out of the mire so that she flew out like a cork and flipped upside down in the air with all her might, her back flung against the oak. The impact was so strong that leaves fell from the oak, and a couple of crows relieved themselves off schedule. "Are you all right, Granny?" I inquired as I approached the tree. But instead of gratitude this monster jumped up on his feet and just jumped on the branch, which was 4 meters above the ground. And it rushed through the treetops in the direction of the hut. I could not catch up with it on the run. It would soon begin to get dark. I started to make my way to my group and 10 minutes later I was there. "Did you crawl to Berlin?" Petrovich frowned. "There I fell on the spikes, I had to disarm them," I lied. "Did you check the house?" Yes, all is clear." Well, I couldn't report that the hut ran away from me, and then I met Baba Yaga. "And what was the noise there?" "I had to throw a grenade into the bog," I continued to compose myself in a coherent way. "The Germans were worried too. Now they stare through all their binoculars," complained Petrovich. "And you still have to go at night to get your tongue." "Don't worry, Petrovich, I'll get the tongue, it's not going anywhere." "On the right 50 meters, I see movement," again reported II Tuliev. Everyone turned around and was stunned. A richly dressed German Frau walked past us through the woods toward the trenches. She was picking flowers and singing a song in the language of our enemy. Petrovich and I are old scouts. We speak German fluently. And when we saw and heard it, our jaws dropped to the ground. Fortunately we were lying down. Meanwhile, a carefree Frau with a bouquet of flowers came to the barbed wire and began to shout, "Gunter! Gunter! It's me, your mother! Gunter, are you there? Take me through this awful wire." The Germans in the trenches seemed as goggled by this picture as we were. For 10 minutes they could not believe their eyes. They rubbed their binoculars, waved their arms, and pointed at the Frau. Frau, on the other hand, kept calling for Gunter. Finally, from the trenches came a noise, "Don't shoot! Don't shoot! It's my mother!" A big, fat kid came out of the trench and ran toward the woman. "Semyonov, is this your work? A noise sounded menacingly above my ear. "No, Comrade Commander, this is the first time I've seen this woman, this time I didn't lie." "You're lying, aren't you? You must have found her in the hut." "Honestly, Petrovich, I've never seen her." Meanwhile Gunther lifted the thorn and Mother hardly got under it. "Mummy, how did you get here?" Gunther stared in amazement. "Ooh, son, our Führer from now on allowed parents to visit their sons at the front. I was kindly given a seat on the plane. I arrived a couple of hours ago and got a little lost in this forest. The hearing in the thicket was excellent, and we caught every word." "What the hell is she talking about? What plane? What Führer?" Petrovich whispered in a daze. Apparently, Gunther could not believe his ears either, but his eyes saw his own mother, and it completely confused him. Gunther embraced her and escorted her to the dugout. We continued to lie there with our jaws dropped. "What kind of parental day have I just seen, Semyonov?" The commander woke up. "We still have to take the tongue, and his mother has arrived. What shall we do now?" "Something tells me, Petrovich, that they'll have fun there soon. Let's just watch for now." It was getting dark. The moon lazily came out for its night shift. Forest sounds began to fade. "Some movement to the right and left of the Germans," Tulev reported quietly. We took a closer look. A bluish, dimly glowing fog was coming over the German trenches from both sides. It gradually covered all their positions. After a couple of minutes, music started coming out of the dugout. Then cheerful voices and laughter began to be heard. At first the laughter was only men's, but then women began to laugh as well. We heard a lot of women's voices. They squealed and laughed. The carousal was gaining momentum. Drunken yelling and cackling. Chorals singing throughout the forest. "Where did so many women come from?" "We only saw one," said Petrovich, perplexed. But no one could explain this fact. We just watched the events unfold. The party had reached its peak. The noise was so loud that all the frogs in the swamp hid. I was about to head out to get my tongue while the Germans were making noise and getting drunk. But then everything went quiet as if on cue. Just deafening silence. The whole forest froze. And after a few seconds, we heard a scream. It was the most heartbreaking scream I'd ever heard. It was like the forest itself was screaming in pain. It was a mystical moment, and we were all chilled to the bone. The night forest, the age-old trees, the huge moon. The German trenches are shrouded in a shimmering mist. And over it all, a chilling scream. Comments and discussions at https://4store. ru/history4notlife/107798 Resvedka. HTML. When all was quiet, a figure of inhuman proportions emerged from the fog into the moonlight. 3 feet tall, arms to the ground. It looked like its skin was peeling away in rags. Red burning eyes were staring right at us. We felt in our gut that it could see us. A kind of primal fear paralyzed everyone. We lay there, afraid to move. At the same time I realized quite clearly that it was all over in the trenches. Apparently, bringing me to this thought, the creature jumped up, right into the treetops. And the branches began to rustle and sag, marking the creepy creature's swift movement into the thicket of the night forest. "What was that?" Petrovich wheezed. "A woodsman," answered Tulev. "How do you know?" "My grandfather told me, he was a hunter, and he saw it himself." Everybody understood that something out of the ordinary had happened with the Germans. That's why there was no desire to go up to them at night. The commander understood that and decided to wait until morning. With the dawn the fog over the trenches cleared and we went straight to them. A trail of blood ran from the German positions to the spot where the woodland spirit had jumped the tree. In the trenches themselves was an utterly gruesome picture. Soldiers were torn to pieces, which were lying all over the place. But the most terrible thing awaited us in the German dugout. In the middle of the bunker the severed heads were gathered in a neat pyramid. From the base of this pyramid, rays of ripped-out arms diverged in all directions. Around this ghastly daisy, in absolute silence, with a stool in his hands, waltzed the crazy Gunther. His head was completely gray, and a blissful smile spread across his face. "It's all as I promised, one to go," I muttered quietly with horror in my eyes. "What?" murmured Petrovich. "Yes, no. Nothing. Just trying to understand what happened here. We took Gunther with us. True, he was of no use, but we couldn't leave him here. Let his superiors decide his fate." The dugout and bunker were blown up. After that we went to ours. A couple of days later artillery was moved across the isthmus between the bogs. And in the first days of autumn the Bryansk offensive operation began, as a result of which the city of Bryansk was liberated.